Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. I want to discuss, I want to discuss the complexity of law or the nature of law being a basic education or something like that. But I think ultimately it's the complexity of law that I want to address here. So, the concern I have is that in an anarchist society, in an anarcho-capitalist society, where the government, where it's just there's no government, there's no overarching authority, that the term caveat emptor would apply. Like it already does. I mean, in the United States of America, you go buy something, and if it's really egregious, if you take it home and it's really egregious, and you say, okay, this was misrepresented on the package, or whatever. If it's really egregious, you can actually sue, right? You can actually go to the court and say, look, false advertising, I thought it was this, it was made to look like these other products, and if the judge agrees, then you get whatever, and the company has to pay a fine or whatever. Now what's interesting is sometimes the person who's damaged, they were only damaged to the tune of $20 or $50 or $1,000 or whatever the product is, but the government then levies a fine against the company of 1.2 million or 17 million or something. So that is fraud, damaging other people, right? But the individuals involved, sometimes they don't even appreciate that they've been damaged, or it's not worth their time to go after. So those things would just go unavenged. There would just be no avenger for those things. The government is the avenger for those things. There's no profit motive in avenging those things. There's only a profit motive in doing them, right? So these people are selling some board game or something that is $75 or $100 that looks like some competitor's board game, and you get it home and it's junk. The batteries, it doesn't work. It's plastic, it breaks. It's junk. Okay, so this is false advertising. This is fraud. They're selling a $10 worth piece of junk for $75 or $100 because it looks like their competitor's item. This is a case where there's nobody to avenge it in an anarchist society, but it's sort of like a specialist thing to go in and look at this and think about it and analyze it and say, what's really the case here? So my point is that in a free society, we would have laws that would really be quite intricate, describing when force or fraud was being applied or occurring, or what you were free to do or weren't free to do. Now, we wouldn't have the menagerie and the mess of laws that we have today about you can't put a dam on your property, you can't hold back water. EPA has just gone insane with these sorts of things. So we wouldn't have this menagerie of laws, but it occurs to me we would actually have quite complex laws. For example, telecommunications and computers and stuff, we would have, our laws would have to keep up with the technology as it advanced, and we would have to define what is it to damage someone else. Like doing a denial of service attack. You say, no, all I did was I wrote a program and pressed a button, and then my computer just messaged their computer 1,000,000 times a second for all week. That's all I did. Well, we define you setting your computer to send us a message every 10th of millionth of a second as damage. There. We defined it as damage in the law. Now, to some extent, then, the law, since it's more complicated than any individual can keep up with, and there's more areas of the law, and it advances in more ways than any given individual can keep up with, the law is an education that goes in advance of any given individual going into that field. Now, that isn't always true. The fields have to come into existence to begin with, and the laws have to be interpreted and set to begin with. But after that, like when you go to open a bank account, let's say, you can study the laws and you can study the way the banks offer you services, and all of that is based on the law. And you can study the laws and say, well, I can open this type of account and so on because the law says that I can do this and this and interest. Now, removing the question of whether or not the bank should be so heavily regulated, just suffice it to say that in an objectivist society, we would simply have some sort of laws about, if someone deposits the money, they're responsible, the bank is responsible and answerable for it, and if they can't give the money back, it's fraud or something like that. There would be some laws of some kind. And even though a given individual who's just turned 18 and got his job and he's looking to open a bank account for the first time, even though he does not understand and is not educated and is new to the subject, yet preceding him is this body of well-worked out laws that protect him and his individual rights when he walks into that bank to open an account. In anarchy, it would just be him versus the bank. And what could the bank trick him into? And nobody to avenge him. Now see, the law doesn't need to come in and avenge the situation after. The law has already been there before. The law was already there. When he walks into the bank to open that account, the law has come before and said to other banks, you mustn't do this and that, and so on. Precedent has been set. So what I'm proposing here is two things, I guess. The complexity of law and the importance of objective law in operating a smooth, sophisticated, advanced society. Because it's because of the finite nature of knowledge. Not everybody can be an expert on everything. Therefore, setting down clear definitions in law of what constitutes harm, even in new fields, as the fields advance and grow, we have to set down new rules and laws. This is a gift to people, to new people who come up into the world, and to people who don't have infinite knowledge, and who don't have time to be a lawyer or to be a researcher, just so they can do whatever it is, buy a car or open a bank account or buy a cheeseburger, right? When you go buy a cheeseburger, you know that it's illegal to sell adulterated food or substances, right? Now, leaving aside whether this and that and how efficient it is for the government to do that, the government should have definitions constituting what is harmful and what's illegal. And knowing about that in advance is a value to our society, a huge value. The complexity and the existence of law before the fact, before you go and partake of some service or something. Those are both very, very important, and both would be lost in the anarchist system, wouldn't they? So, or they'll have to come up with some facsimile of them, which is just going to be a hippopotamus hoop dancing.